to another edition of the Marty Heiser Show. My name is Al Robinson. I will be your host for today. Hold on one second. Let's see here. Hey, can you hear me now? Okay, cool. Let's try again. Hi, everybody. My name is Al Robinson. Welcome to the Marty Heiser Show. As you can tell, I am not Marty Heiser. He's out in Ridgefield today dealing with some matters with local government, so I wish him all the best. He'll be back here pretty soon. But today, I'm going to be running the show, and we're going to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart, which is the topic of immigration in Greater Danbury, and immigration in the state of Connecticut. I have here a couple of cool people. I have here the host of Progressive Soup, David Stevenson.
Thank you.
All right, and his partner in crime, Gene Hislop from Progressive Soup, and also a very good
host.
Yes, and a very good immigration activist in the area. We've known each other for a number of years.
Yes.
I've been through many battles. I'm sure we'll be through some other battles in Danbury as we press forward here. So real quick, the reason why I have these people here is because we have some issues relating to immigration that have developed here, that have just went down here recently in the city. Number one is a recent settlement with the city of Danbury with the day laborers down at Kennedy Park, better known to most people in the area as the Danbury 11. To make a long story short, back in September of 2006, day laborers at Kennedy Park were picked up by a contractor who was actually an undercover agent, promising these individuals work, but instead of giving them work, they gave them a trip down to the Danbury Police Department, where agents for the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement were there to detain them. What has transpired from that is a lot of allegations of the city not playing any role in the raid. In December of 2006, Mayor Boughton several times to several media outlets, separate reporters on different occasions, stated on the record to the residents of the city of Danbury that Danbury and its police department played no part in the raid. He said this to, for instance, Channel 8. He also said this to Channel 30, and he also said it to Mark Spencer of the Hartford Courant. Later on in 2007, when there was some information that came out of a Freedom of Information complaint filed by the attorneys for the Danbury 11, this information showed that Danbury had some role in this raid. It was found out months later, after the mayor was stating constantly to the public that Danbury played no part in the raid, that the person that drove the vehicle that picked up the day laborers at Kennedy Park was an undercover Danbury police officer. From there, that happened in 2007, and also in 2007, the attorneys for the day laborers filed a civil lawsuit against the city of Danbury and the Department of Homeland Security. They alleged that the city of Danbury participated in a raid without having the authority to do so, as well as alleging that the city of Danbury was involved in what's called racial profiling. Since this case happened, since the events that created this case happened a very long time ago, what I want to do for you here is take you down a trip down memory lane. We're going to go back to 2006. Luckily, I was around doing my website, Hat City Blog, back during this time, and I was very involved in capturing all the press conferences, all the demonstrations, anything that had to do with the Danbury 11 case. I made sure I had a camera on it because two things went through my mind. One, when the mayor said that the city played no part in this raid, I knew he was lying. And number two, I knew that this would be a great example of, a city, a municipality, having to be forced to go to court and defend themselves in terms of immigration. Before that, the closest thing I can recall was maybe Hazleton, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. So since Hazleton went down, I couldn't keep an eye on Hazleton because I'm not from Pennsylvania. This went down here in Danbury, and I had enough common sense to say to myself, look, keep an eye on this case. Eventually, either this is going to be settled or the city's going to come out on the wrong end of the stick, and you can go back and just say, I told you so. Since we now settle for over $400,000 to the day laborers and spend a lot of money in terms of legal fees, I can clearly sit here today and tell you on behalf of the day laborers and the attorneys and the activists who fought on behalf of them, we told you so. And we told you so big time, so much so that the city just paid out $400,000. And I can promise you, without question, Mark Boughton and the Danbury Police Department will not be going down there conducting those type of silly activities at Kennedy Park anytime soon or ever again, regardless what they say. So without further ado, I'll keep the babbling down to a minimum because, you know, Marty can just keep going on for 10 minutes or so, just going off on a rant. I try to keep my stuff as concise as possible. So, Rich, if you're ready in the back room, I have some video. This is a flashback going back to September of 2006. We'll see some file footage from the Danbury 11 rally that happened right after the arrest was made, as well as an interview I did with one of the attorneys for the Danbury 11 that I did back in December of 2006 when they first filed the Freedom of Information complaint against the city and the Department of Homeland Security when they were looking for more documents pertaining towards this particular action that happened on Kennedy Park. So, Rich, if you got the video going, just hit play, and once the video's done, we'll come right back.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, and thank you for coming. My name is Alyssa DeRosa, and I'm a representative from the Danbury Peace Coalition. Last week, September 19th, ICE agents disguised as contractors 11 day laborers into getting into an unmarked van with promises of jobs. Instead of work, these innocent men were taken to the Danbury police station, followed by Hartford for questioning. It has since been brought to our attention that the Danbury 11 are being held in Boston, where as of Saturday, they have not yet been formally charged. Most of these men have been unable to speak to their worried family members. Imagine your father, uncle, brother, cousin not coming home one evening and not knowing where they are or if they're safe. These people did nothing wrong. The ICE was not searching for criminals, but randomly selected these men who just wanted to work.
As a member and president of this organization, my name is Leonel Villavicencio. I am the new doctoring president for the right of immigrants. As you know, she mentioned it. She already said in September 19, 11 members of this community of Danbury, hard-working men, that very early in the morning, meet in Kennedy Park for Labor Day looking for work. They are tricked into a unmarked vehicle with several immigration and customs enforcement in plain clothes agents with a load of job. After entering in the vehicle, those men were detained with the help of the Danbury Police Department. Before it was transported to the city of Hartford and questioned, and then to Boston for imprisonment. Those men have not been charged, and most of them, 11 working, have not been able to contact their family member, leaving many relatives searching for their missing husband, father, uncles, and loved ones. This act of cowardly and intimidation geared at the Danbury immigrant community also disregard the right and safety of these people and cosmopolitan.
Please welcome Wilson Hernandez of the Ecuadorian Center.
Good morning. As an Ecuadorian, I am one of those who are hurt by the arrest of these 11 brothers from this community. It's sad to know that 11 honest members of our community are in a prison today. I can assure you that 99% of Ecuadorians in this community are honest people. I cannot assure you that everybody is an honest person. I don't think anybody can assure that all members of their families, of their groups, are honest people. And I cannot do that. But I can tell you that these people immigrated to this country with hope. They immigrated to this country because they wanted to offer their families a better future. Instead of that, they are finding persecution, incarceration, and now facing possible deportation. The only crime that they have committed is of dreaming with a better future for their families. Is that a crime? I can assure you that the Ecuadorian Civic Center will not defend any criminal, even if they are the brother of Wilson Hernandez. We are not an organization that's encouraging illegal immigration. We'll never do that. We know how painful it is for a poor man, a poor father, to travel from South America to the United States, to face all the risks that that trip brings with this problem. But I can assure you that if we can communicate better, as Mrs. Taborsak said, with elected officials, we can solve this problem. But we also should remind our local elected officials that the immigration issue is a federal issue. What we can do locally is to offer these poor people some kind of comfort, some kind of help. Let's act as human beings. Let's remember what the greatest leader of the Western Hemisphere did, what Jesus taught us. Jesus is the greater leader of our culture, and he taught us to love others as we wish to be loved. Are we loving these people? I think this is an act of hate.
Okay, can you just give me a recap and just tell me basically what the suit is about and what you are trying to achieve with the suit?
Sure. Well, we know that the Department of Homeland Security was aware of the city of Danbury's campaign to harass, intimidate, and even drive out immigrants. We know they're aware of it because they received letters from the mayor, from former Representative Nancy Johnson, asking for increased enforcement. So to the extent that ICE, that the Department of Homeland Security, allowed themselves to be willing participants in this campaign, is what we're trying to figure out here. We sent a standard request under the Freedom of Information Act to the Department of Homeland Security about a month and a half ago. They had 30 days to reply. They didn't reply. Really, we're left with no other option but to sue, because the community organizations have a right and really need to know what it is the federal government is doing here in Danbury.
My name is Lynn Tabersack. I'm a member of the city's 21-member county council. And as a city official, I'm very concerned about Danbury's involvement in the undercover operation of a year ago in Danbury. I know it's not appropriate for municipalities to carry out these kind of warrantless stings. And it really does call into question the mayor's judgment a year ago in authorizing the city's involvement. I know that Chief Alan Baker didn't act alone on this. But Mark Boughton does have a pattern of putting the spotlight onto Danbury for these really hot-button national issues, acting like a candidate for federal or statewide office. But I think in this instance, he actually acted like a two-bit Yahoo cowboy, and in doing that has resulted in exposing the city of Danbury to this legal challenge. Now, I'm not a legal scholar, but I do know that the United States Constitution does apply to every square inch of our country, and that people's civil rights need to be protected even in Danbury. And as a city, we certainly don't want to be arbitrary and capricious. Now, if our plaintiffs do not prevail in this lawsuit, I am willing to eat crow, and I certainly hope the mayor of the city of Danbury will eat crow if our plaintiffs do prevail, as I expect them to. And without further ado, we're going to begin this morning's press conference, and I will be hanging around in the back near the infant.
Could you tell me your name and how to spell that, please?
I'm going to give you a card.
Oh, could you say the name? That way all the TV stations get it.
Lynn Tabersack. Taborsak.
Any title, ma'am?
Common Council Member at Large.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for coming. My name is Jerry Greenspan, G-E-R-I Greenspan, and I'm a law student intern at the Jerome and Frank Legal Services Organization in New Haven, Connecticut. I'm one of the law students who are representing the Danbury 11, as they are popularly known, and I've been working on this case since September of last year under the supervision of Attorney Mike Wishke. As you know, we're here to announce a lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of Danbury's immigration enforcement campaign. The plaintiffs are 9 of the men who were arrested in the illegal sting operation conducted by the Danbury police last September. The 10th plaintiff was arrested for a civil immigration infraction by Danbury police in the course of a pretextual traffic stop. The sting operation last September shows just how far the city is willing to go, and they've gone too far. On the morning of September 19, 2006, the Danbury Police Department, with the assistance of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, staged an undercover sting operation in Kennedy Park that resulted in the arrests of 11 day laborers. 9 of those day laborers are plaintiffs in this lawsuit. They're bringing this suit because the Danbury police arrested them in utter disregard for their constitutional rights, and the ICE officers who were present went along with the plan. On the morning of the 19th, a Danbury police officer went undercover, posing as a contractor. He deceived day laborers at Kennedy Park into thinking he had a job for them. He drove them to a parking lot where they were immediately surrounded, arrested, and placed in police custody. No questions asked. The sting operation was conducted with no specific targets in mind. The undercover officer picked up whomever he could get in the crowd of Latino day laborers. He had no idea of the plaintiffs' names, where they were from, or what their immigration status might be. All he knew was that they were Latino day laborers standing in a place that the city didn't want them to stand. As a result of the arrests, the men were separated from their families, friends, and community, and they were detained, in some cases, for over a month in facilities as far away as Texas. The arrests of the Danbury 11 were illegal for at least 4 reasons, and this is what we allege in the lawsuit. 1, this was an act of racial profiling. 2, the arrests were made without probable cause, and the police didn't even bother to ask a single question that could have provided probable cause. 3, the arrests were in retaliation for the day laborers' visible use of public space at Kennedy Park. And 4, without a formal agreement with ICE, which Danbury does not have, local police lack the authority to make civil immigration arrests. The 10th plaintiff in this lawsuit, Danilo Vargas, was subjected to another immigration enforcement strategy of the Danbury police. While driving to a laundromat one day with his wife, Mr. Vargas was pulled over by a Danbury police officer on a pretext, a supposedly noisy muffler. In reality, the police officer wanted to interrogate him about his immigration status. After running Mr. Vargas's name through the National Crime Information Center database, the police officer eventually arrested him, not for any crime, but for a civil immigration infraction. These incidents are only some examples of the way Danbury officials treat the city's Latino and immigrant residents. Our other speakers can tell you about many more. These actions are both unlawful and unconstitutional. Federal courts across the country have consistently affirmed that only the federal government can enforce federal immigration law. The case of Hazleton, Pennsylvania, which many of you may know about, is perhaps the most well-known example. Moreover, arrests of this kind are bad policy and bad policing. Cities like Danbury have little to gain, but a lot to lose by alienating their immigrant and minority communities. Such policies only drive residents deep into the shadows, making them fearful of government and less willing to cooperate with law enforcement. Ultimately, these policies make it more difficult for local officials and police to keep their cities safe, and this harms everyone. The lawsuit filed today asks the federal court to declare that what happened to these 10 men was illegal and unconstitutional. Again, will be available after everyone has concluded speaking for questions, and I'd be happy to speak in more detail about the lawsuit if anybody would like to know.
Really all this is a Freedom of Information complaint dressed up to look like a lawsuit. I mean, this is a bunch of Yale law students that don't have much to do with their time.
Yes, he did once call for Danbury police to be given the power to enforce immigration law, but he says the city was not involved in planning that raid. It was the feds.
Fountain says the city played no part in the September 19th action, but doesn't think there would be a problem if it did.
The arrests were part of a sting operation. A Danbury police officer posed as a contractor and drove a van to Kennedy Park. This is where he picked up workers willing to help tear down a fence.
The surprise was when we got out of the van, we were surrounded by a bunch of men, and we were surprised and frightened because we didn't know what was happening.
The lawsuit claims Danbury police overstepped their bounds by trying to enforce federal immigration law.
Ted and Ann, this is where that sting was carried out, where those 11 workers got into a van driven not by a contractor, but by a police officer. A sting, an operation that a lawsuit filed today says was illegal.
On the morning of the 19th, a Danbury police officer went undercover, posing as a contractor. He deceived day laborers at Kennedy Park into thinking he had a job for them. He drove them to a parking lot where they were immediately surrounded, arrested, and placed in police custody. No questions asked. The sting operation was conducted with no specific targets in mind. The undercover officer picked up whomever he could get in the crowd of Latino day laborers. He had no idea of the plaintiffs' names, where they were from, or what their immigration status might be. All he knew was that they were Latino day laborers standing in a place that the city didn't want them to stand. Without a formal agreement with ICE, which Danbury does not have, local police lack the authority to make civil immigration arrests. Federal courts across the country have consistently affirmed that only the federal government can enforce federal immigration law.
Back in December, when you filed the FOI suit, Mayor Bowden on Channel 8 and on Channel 30 stated that Danbury police played no part in the raid. When did you find out that the Danbury police officer was driving the van?
When did we find that out?
What time? This was, I think if I'm correct, Mayor Bowden made these statements back in December. When did you find out?
Yeah. We found out in, what was it, perhaps April? That's right. So actually we've learned this in the immigration proceedings where we're seeking to suppress the unlawfully obtained evidence. The government, in their brief that they submitted to the court, actually said that it was a Danbury police officer driving the van. And so, according to ICE, it was a Danbury operation.
Besides the person driving that van, were there any other officers, Danbury police officers, involved in the raid, and if so, how?
Absolutely. They were in the parking lot when the men were arrested and were among those who surrounded the men at the parking lot and arrested them. They are named as defendants in this suit because of the actions that they have.
Just for a little context, a little background here, this is after Mayor Boughton had sought to have the police authorization to enforce immigration laws. It was told by the state government or the federal government that the state government that they could not do that.
That's right.
So if what you're saying is true, if the involvement of Danbury police officers is what you're saying it is, does that violate state law, federal law, what does that show?
It violates the Fourth Amendment because it means they didn't have the authority to make the arrest that they carried out. And that's what we're alleging in this complaint. You're absolutely right that the mayor has sought the authorization. Actually, he wanted to have state officers, state troopers deputized through this memorandum of understanding, and was denied. The governor of Connecticut, Jerry Rell, decided that it was bad policy. And so you're absolutely right that the mayor knows and the police chief knows how one would go about enforcing civil immigration law at the local level, and it's only through this memorandum of understanding. And yet they decided, for whatever reason, to do it anyway, which is why we're being sued.
Has the mayor clarified a statement that he made in December?
Not to our knowledge, no.
No.
Thank you.
Recently, we've been apprised of a lawsuit that's been filed by the Yale Law School against the City of Danbury, Chief of Police, and Immigration Customs and Enforcement. At this time, I have not seen or reviewed the complaint because, frankly, Yale didn't have the courtesy to give us a copy. So I'm not going to be able to comment on any details of the complaint or any allegations that are in the complaint.
Did federal authorities contact you and ask you to perform this operation, or did you contact them for assistance? Who asked first?
Well, I think at this point, again, without seeing the nature of the complaint, is really something that we're going to discuss now, particularly because of the litigation. That'll all come out of court.
Things like that in their freedom of information request brought 3 months ago that there were police officer driving the van or there were police, is that part of the assistance?
Well, we're not going to comment about the specifics of the case. We haven't read the complaint because we haven't received a copy of it yet. But in terms of who assisted who and the actual details and specifics of that event, we just can't comment on it.
The chief just said Danbury assisted us. Is that, am I clear on that?
Logistical assistance.
Logistical.
That's right. The nature of that assistance, we're not going to discuss.
To your understanding, the chief's understanding, who made the initial arrests in this situation?
Again, that's a detail of the operation we're just not going to discuss with you, Mark. We need to read.
Because that's a very public thing. I mean, who made the arrest? You or I?
Well, there's differing opinions on that, but we're not going to comment on that because we haven't read the complaint. We certainly don't know what the nature of the complaint is.
All right, well, there you go. I know the video is a little long, but it's been a long time since we've been talking about this case, or this case made headlines in the news, so I wanted to make sure everybody had an opportunity to take a trip down memory lane and get familiar with the case and what transpired, and more importantly, what was said by local officials and activists on both sides of the issue. So again, you saw a press conference that happened, I think about a week after the raids happened on Kennedy Park. That particular press conference was held by supporters of the Danbury 11 in front of City Hall, September 2006, and there was actually a rally in support of the Danbury 11 that happened down at Kennedy Park, and the protests started at Kennedy Park and went down to City Hall. Unfortunately, for time constraints, I don't have enough time to give you footage of that, but we're going to make that stuff all available up on the website, as well as some other goodies that we'll get into later on. Again, I have David Stevenson from Progressive Soup, and I have Gene Hislop from Progressive Soup. The reason why I have these two individuals on is because this week I had an opportunity to come on their show and talk about the Danbury 11 case, and I just wanted to continue that conversation that we had on the show with you guys, because we brought up a lot of stuff that happened in the deposition of Mark Boughton that completely contradicts, at least in my opinion, contradicts some of the statements that he made in the video footage that you saw. For instance, back in December of 2006, as you saw, and I'm not making this up, I'm using his own words, he said this to Channel 30, he said it to Channel 8, and he said to Mark Spencer of the Hartford Courant that Danbury played no part, no role in this raid whatsoever. And he continued that stance, he continued that stubborn stance from December all the way up until the moment, at least a week before the lawsuit was filed, because I think a week or 2 weeks beforehand, I had an opportunity to talk to one of the attorneys for the Danbury 11 in the deportation trial, which is different from the civil trial. There's actually two, for people who don't know also, there's actually two trials going on almost simultaneously. You have the deportation hearing and you had the civil lawsuit. Some of the stuff that came out in the information that came out in the deportation hearing exposed that Danbury did play a role in the raid. In fact, an undercover police officer from the Danbury Police Department was the individual driving the van that picked up the day laborers. So, you know, we talked a lot about this. What are your feelings in regards to this case? Do you think the mayor was being truthful in regards to the city's role in this raid? How about you?
No. You know, I was actually involved very early on in the Danbury 11 case as an activist, watching the whole thing very intensely. Some of the people you had in the videotape, you know, I'd been spending a lot of time with.
It's like memory lane.
Yeah, it really is.
It's like Stop the Raids.
And
came out
exactly,
of that
and I was involved with.
11.
I was involved in Stop the Raids at that time, and I remember very clearly that all of us knew that Boughton was, you know, not being honest. We all had a feeling that. It was more than a feeling. We knew that the city was involved in it. Getting him to actually admit or getting any evidence that the city was involved in it was a different story. We had to wait for that information to come out. You can't just put that allegation out there without, you know, proving it. So we were all waiting, and I remember the day that the news broke that the city had been involved. I mean, we were like whooping and hollering that we finally had the proof, you know, because what people don't understand is the gravity, I think, of the allegation at the time and how shocking it was that a city would overstep their authority and do a job that is traditionally the federal government's, and by law, the federal government's responsibility.
Now let's talk about that real quick, because it's something very important to point out, because Boughton's been doing some flim-flamming out there in the media recently, trying to talk about the 287G program, which is complete nonsense. As you heard in the video footage from the attorney from the Danbury 11 when they filed the civil lawsuit, she said at that time you did not have the authority, the city of Danbury did not have the authority to conduct immigration style arrest proceedings, things of that nature, because he did not have an agreement with the federal government, a la 287G program.
And that's why at one point Boughton was pressing so hard to deputize state police, you know, into a program with ICE, is because he knew that the federal government, you know, was not coming to towns like Danbury often to do style raids, you know, immigration raids rather. And so he full well knew that he did not have the authority to do such a raid. He also knew how it would appear when you're going to a group of, I mean, one thing is they took 150, you know, day laborers, but why target, you know, 11 day laborers out of there and, you know, take them on, you know, immigration's violations?
And again, as it was said, you know, I remember in articles, and just talking about the case makes me remember the articles that came up. I remember there was one article that was done in a Spanish-speaking newspaper that talked to one of the persons who decided not, at the last moment, not to get in that van.
Right.
You know, and he was one of the lucky ones who said, I don't think so. This seems a little strange. So it just shows that these people were picked up entirely at random.
That's right.
Entirely at random.
And if it had been something like, okay, you know, congregating in a place, you know, which now we have that parade ordinance, which is kind of funny, but if it had been congregating in a place you weren't supposed to congregate, loitering, littering, or whatever, then he would have had to try to get all 100 and however many immigrants, you know, were there out of there, you know. It wasn't about that. It was about, you know, we think these people are undocumented and we're going to get them. And
the city stated, or trying to state, and they continue to try to state here that, you know, the origins of this particular thing came down to I should say undocumented, but day laborers were darting out into the streets of Kennedy Park, causing a traffic scene, causing a traffic hazard.
And we already have laws on the books that deal with, you know, with minor traffic violations like that.
And not only that, it's, you know, in an article that came out today, and unfortunately I don't have the article right here in front. I wish I did, but I don't have it. But I will post it up on the website, and you'll see postings on this soon. That the city attorney came out and said, you know, well, we think if we ever went with the court, that Danbury was okay in arresting these guys because we have probable cause because of the traffic violations that they're creating. You know, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, well, okay, now you finally admit that Danbury arrested these people, number one. Number two, if the issue was a traffic violation, why was it that the only thing they were charged with was an immigration crime, no traffic?
You would charge them with the crime at hand, and then later on determine and add on the charge. Now here's an overarching lesson for kids. Anybody that wants to be a mayor or a civic leader one day, be very careful who you play to, who you choose as your base and who you play to, because the mayor of Danbury has unfortunately made the decision along the way to play to a very narrow base of people that have very bad feelings, we'll call it hate, for lack of a better word, toward immigrants, particularly immigrants that we have in Danbury now. And by doing that, he kind of boxed himself into a corner, and now it's a corner that he's going to have a very difficult time getting out of.
Yeah, and the problem is that it's not only that you're playing up to a certain crowd, you know, and that's a fair thing. That's a fair criticism. You know, he can argue that he wasn't. He's trying to protect the city, but you know, the argument
shows up. We know what the events that he shows up.
Right, and an argument can be made that he's you know, ginning up to a certain crowd. I mean, why in the hell would you have a leader of a hate group meeting with you and going to her events and speaking on her events? I mean, that's absolutely crazy. You know, it's kind of like, you know, John DeStefano in New Haven going down to a Ku Klux Klan rally and speaking out there. It's the same equivalent. I mean, that group, at least Marciano and her hate mongers, are no better than some of the scum that we see in, you know, some other degrading hate groups in this area.
Hate is hate.
Hate is hate. Hate is hate. And, you know, it isn't necessarily, I think I brought this up before, it isn't, you know, think about Watergate. You know, it wasn't about the break-in, it's about the cover-up and the lying.
Yeah.
Iran-Contra, it's about the lying.
It's a little bit about both things. It's a slap in the face and a almost totally discounting of your public and almost saying, you know what, you guys are stupid and I can put this one over on you. So it's a real betrayal of the public's trust, and it's an insult to the public to lie to them. So it's adding literally insult to injury. You know, in this case, committing a civil rights violation, overstepping your bounds, and then you're adding lying on top of it. It's adding insult to injury.
And again, one of the things I wanted to do is during this whole entire ordeal, because I knew as soon as it went down, I thought, oh boy, Danbury's going to be in trouble for this one. We're going to be called the armpit of Connecticut once again. It's not going to make us look good. And then the mayor got out there and started saying, well, we didn't play any role in this raid. And again, it's been documented in multiple media outlets.
We're not that kind of city.
Right. So I said, you know, what's going to happen is eventually at some point in time, and I didn't know it was going to take that long, but I said at some point in time, he's going to put his hand on the Bible. He's going to have to answer some questions under oath. And then now we're going to see what's going on here. So although it took a long time, and I waited and I waited and I waited, we finally got to a point where, all right, and after, he's kicking and screaming and trying to push this thing off till after the election, when he was running for lieutenant governor, himself, Mike McLaughlin, and Chief Baker were deposed in this case, were put under oath, and was asked questions from the attorneys for the attorneys representing the day laborers. They were asked questions, and a lot of stuff came out in that. And after those depositions were done, it was just a matter of months, and then suddenly there's a settlement.
Right.
Suddenly there's a settlement. And it's unfortunate that the public up to this point have not been given an opportunity to see the details, to see the actual transcript from the deposition. A deposition, by the way, which was videotaped. So I think it's even more important. Although the transcripts are good, you can see a lot of stuff by people's body language and how they, facial expressions and things of that nature. Because if you read the transcript, you can tell there's some points where somebody's getting a little tense under the pressure.
And I can imagine almost Boughton sitting on at the table and shooting looks at his lawyer to get approval before he says anything. You can you can read through the transcript and you can see he was lawyered up on certain questions that he knew he was going to get certain questions hit towards him. He had prepared responses towards. For instance, let's by the way, I'm sorry, I keep talking about this. Look at what I have here. This is the transcript of Mayor Boughton's deposition in my hands right here. In my hands right here, it is, right here. And what we're going to do is eventually I am going to get this up, available for the public. There's some other stuff I'm trying to get as well. But trust me, ladies and gentlemen, you will have this in your possession so you can print out all 300 pages, or if you have an iPad, you can upload it to your iPad and make yourself a cup of coffee and get all those news clippings from his statements in the past, and you can just read that, this transcript versus what he said in the press, and you can say, wait a second, this doesn't quite jive. But there's points even in what I briefly read in that deposition just within a few moments where even under oath, he makes contradictory statements. So he kind of shifts all over the place. Under oath, under oath.
Well, there's one point in this deposition here in the transcript. I haven't read the whole thing, but I know where certain sections are at because you skim through it fast enough. Like, oh, there's a question I want to hear. When he was asked, when did you learn that Danbury was involved with the arrest or whatever it is? He said, well, I didn't learn that until a year prior to me giving this testimony or whatever, a year prior to this thing. Now, I think he said a year prior. Yeah, I'm certain he said a year prior. This was done in 2010, this deposition. So go back a year prior, that would be 2009. Now, everybody knew because I did the interview with the attorneys. You saw in the video footage there that I did ask these questions in front of these attorneys directly. When did you guys find out that Danbury was involved with this? And they said, well, we found out from the Freedom of Information, from the information we got from the Freedom of Information request during the deportation proceedings. So we knew about Danbury's involvement back at least to September of 2007.
Right.
All right. We knew that there was a booking report that labeled a Danbury police officer as the arresting officer. We knew that a Danbury undercover police officer was the person driving the van, stopped the van, picked up the people, brought them over to the Danbury Police Department where ICE was waiting for them.
Right.
It's all out there.
And now, certainly, even as Mark was giving these different interviews, as you mentioned, Channel 8, Channel 30, the Hartford Courant, different times, different places, and each one of them making the same statement that Danbury had nothing to do with the raid. He had that opportunity, certainly, to bring anybody into his office that worked for him and get to the bottom of the truth. If he didn't know about it, he could have found out about it in the midst of those interviews.
Absolutely.
He could have corrected the situation. And again, this is where when you tell something on camera that you either certainly should know it's not true, or in fact probably have a pretty good inkling that it's not true. That's very unfortunate to do.
If I might insert, knowing Danbury like I do, and having had the opportunity to observe Mayor Boughton for so long, since he's been in office for so long now, this is an extremely on-hand mayor, like he's hands-on, rather, that's what I meant to say, hands-on mayor. You know, he's attending funerals of people, you know, in the community. He knows everybody, he knows everything. There is no way he didn't know that morning, because the man is so hands-on, he is so in control of the city, you know, and I don't mean that he has perfect control, but I mean he knows what's going on.
Well, and again, let's keep it in the context of it's very important to keep this thing in context, or like what we heard at the time in which statements were made. Now, the action went down in September of 2006. When Boughton was going around saying Danbury played no part in this raid, was not in September of 2006. That's not when he was telling the press that. He told the press that in December of 2006.
Long after.
Months afterwards.
Exactly.
And in the deposition, you can read, and again, you'll be able to see this, that, you know, he talked. The day in which that raid went down, I remember this for a reason, because not only because of I knew about, you know, I was keeping an eye on Mark Boughton because he was going out to Brazil.
Right.
He was doing a conference out in Brazil that actual morning.
A conference on immigration, I believe.
Conference on immigration, and I was supposed to, you know, everybody else were watching that. He had a blog going on about that, and it was a semi big deal.
The Brazilian population apparently seems to be important to him.
Well, I won't even get into that, but you know, he talked to the chief during that morning about what happened. He was, you know, and this came up in the transcript, saying, you know, he talked to him briefly about it a couple of times. And then he came back from Brazil and made a couple of statements about the Danbury 11 protest that was happening out there. But still, from September to December, you should have known, especially something like that was big, high profile. There was people protesting in your streets. You knew you were going to get some coverage. And December comes down, you got Channel 3, Channel 8, the Hartford Courant, which is like, and I bring those three big media outlets up because that's not the Danbury News Times.
Right.
That's not WLAD.
Right, exactly.
You know, those are not like the local clowns
or Tribune
who won't go through and do their due diligence in their reporting. You got the big dogs out there coming in here doing reporting and making the local people like you know who look all bad. And then to make the case even worse is that a couple of weeks before the lawsuit was filed, the Fairfield Weekly, who follows my blog, caught wind of the interview I did with one of the Yale law students that, you know, and I broke the news saying that, yeah, Danbury was involved in this raid. I was the first media source to break that story. They picked up on this, and that's where a response from the mayor. And the mayor stated in there, hey, I stand by what I said. You know, we didn't plan to conduct this raid. You know, maybe logistic support, but we didn't plan to conduct that. And that's something he repeated later on in the press conference. Now, I bring this up for a reason, and I know I did it on your show. I'm going to do it real quick here because I don't want to take up a whole lot of airtime from this conversation. But on page 253, line 2 of the deposition, which you'll be able to read. I'm going to read this from here, and again, you'll have an opportunity to see this very, very soon. All right, question. When I say question, the question comes from the attorneys. The answer is from the mayor himself. Question: did the press report a different story as to what happened on September 19th than you said happened on September 19th? Attorneys for the city, attorney from the feds, objection. Answer: there were, I'm going to guess, dozens upon dozens of press accounts of what happened. None of them had been right. Many of them never talked to me. There are press accounts that were written today that are completely inaccurate as to from what limited information I know, which I shared with you, already happened. So if you're going to rely, if you are going to rely to be the press as the arbiter of the exact sequence of events on that day, you're going to chase your tail around all day with that. They are never accurate. They are never right, and particularly now because these papers have been decimated with reporting. They don't do a lot of reporting. So to your answer, there certainly have been inconsistencies right up until 3 months ago in terms of the accounts of what happened that day. Question: and was there any specific controversy about whether what you said happened was different from what actually happened? Again, from the city of Danbury, objection. Answer: I don't recall any controversy. Now, again, this is in the transcript. You'll be able to read this for yourself. Now, to say that there wasn't any controversy, or I don't recall any controversy, is about as dishonest as you can get, because the biggest thing that happened, one of the biggest things is that you went around and said Danbury played no part in this raid. Then it came out months later that Danbury did play a part in this raid.
And there was a press
that's
conference.
the controversy.
And exactly.
And he was, and as you saw the video footage at City Hall when he was questioned by all of the press, including Mark Spencer again, who originally wrote in December that Mark said, you know, Danbury played no part in the raid. You heard Mark later on really call him out, and Mark's like, oh, you got, you know, whoa, come out, blah, blah, blah. There was a controversy because all the people in the press were talking to him about it. It's on videotape.
Absolutely.
So, and then also say that the press is being inaccurate and things of that nature.
Right.
You know, the mayor made these comments himself. This came out in December 2006. He didn't say anything. Well, they're inaccurate back in 2006. And then when he was questioned about it by the Fairfield Weekly months later, he said, "Well, I stand by those statements."
You know, I was thinking about it today. You know, Mayor Boughton has a large population of Danbury that actually very much do like him. And when they hear this, it kind of leaves them two options. Either think that your mayor is so ignorant about what's happening in the city that he didn't know what was going on with his police and what happened with that raid, or believes that he's a liar. Those are the only two possibilities there, and neither one of those are something you want an elected official to be. You don't want them to be ignorant, and you don't want them to be a liar, you know? So it kind of makes you question why people wouldn't really, be on this and examining it and really taking it to heart.
And again, this isn't like, people say, well, you got a problem with Mayor Boughton. You just come after this guy all the time. It's all you do is just bashing this guy. And I'm like, look, if blogs were around during the 1990s, you don't think I'd be after Eriquez?
Right.
If you think blogs were around during the 80s, I wouldn't be after Dyer?
Exactly.
Jeez.
The way the News Times covered Dyer very carefully.
Oh, they're on him.
And went very hard on him. It seems that it would be reasonable that they'd be on Mayor Boughton, too, the same way.
Especially when you have comments that don't quite jive with each other. And instead of that, we have what we had when this deposition was done. We had a news report from the News Times, a reporter from the News Times, who gave such a gloss over of all the details within this deposition that it was just embarrassing. So embarrassing that a reporter for the New Haven Register, Mary O'Leary, did a follow-up. She got to obtain this deposition, and she read it and went through it, and she's like, whoa, this is crazy. In the deposition they talk about what's called a pretext arrest.
Right.
And we know what pretext arrest is for. I mean, for those who don't quite know, let's say, for instance, you think I'm an undocumented immigrant, and I'm driving a car, and maybe I don't have my seatbelt on, and you're the police officer, and you're saying, well, I'm going to pull that guy over because he doesn't have a seatbelt, but what I'm really pulling him over for is because I think he's undocumented, and I want to nail that guy. So that's what a pretext arrest is for. You're using some other false nonsense for...
Which, unfortunately, now is legalized under 287G, by the way.
It's morally wrong, but it's, it's how you're going to prove it.
Exactly.
It's like, look, the guy was illegal. So in this deposition here, and which is Mary O'Leary's first paragraph in her article, which should have been the first paragraph in Dirk Parafort's article or the Tribuna's article, if we saw anything from the Tribuna. They talked about, the mayor was questioned about pretext arrests. Do you agree with a pretext? Do you agree that pretext arrests are wrong? He said, oh, absolutely, I think that's wrong. That's not cool to do. It's not right to do. You're discriminating, blah, blah, blah. Well, then how do you explain what happened at Kennedy Park? These individuals were not picked up for the crimes that you are saying that were supposed to be picked up for, which is traffic violations. Right. There was depositions from the Danbury Police Department talking about why these people were picked up for. They were picked up for, we were picked up for traffic violations and things of that nature, but there was no charge of that.
You don't want, as a city, you don't want to have the reputation of being a city which discriminates, which racially profiles, which is prejudice, which is trampling on the Constitution, which is, I remember back in the 80s watching like Dukes of Hazzard, and, Boss Hogg would do things like that, pretext arrest, we don't want to seem like that kind of city. So it's damaging to the reputation. It's damaging to our pockets to have to defend his statements to the tune of $400,000 in a payout plus whatever the legal fees are.
Right, which around $1 million, we would fairly presume.
Right, and And it's damaging to our trust in our elected officials when they lie to us.
And again, if you're going to, and you know, I'm going to come out and say it again. I think the mayor lied. I think the mayor lied on a lot regarding this case. And again, once you read this deposition, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see a lot of other stuff where these attorneys from Yale are just catching the mayor on right and left and say, hey, you know, I mean, there's one instance the attorneys had an exchange with the mayor. It's like, you know, well, here's an email that you sent to this individual here, and here's your response to this email that this lady was talking about immigration. You said, you know, you call up ICE every day about this stuff. Do you really call ICE every day about this? He said, well, no. Why did you tell her that then? There's a lot of that good stuff going on. But again, I'm going to leave this for the people to read for themselves. Again, it's 300 pages. You're going to love this. And in the end, this case is about, you know, doing something the wrong way. And what happens when cities and municipalities go a little too far without having the authority to do what they want to do. And in this case, it cost us $400,000. And mind you, the federal government paid $250,000. So if you think about this, well, the city didn't play any part in this raid, but we paid almost double the amount that the feds did.
I know.
And paid both of them as taxpayers.
And again, and people are saying, well, this is not on the taxpayers' dime. It's going to be no big deal.
Oh, yeah.
It will, because let me tell you, between the firefighters lawsuit and this thing right here, every time you hit that insurance company, they're like, hey, we might just shoot those premiums up. And it doesn't make a difference who pays for it. In the end, it's the figure that counts. $400,000 plus attorney's fees goes towards this matter, in which there's still unanswered questions in regards to what happened with that raid. And was the city involved? And if the city was involved, why were you telling us something different back then? The people have a right to know.
Which almost ends in the final almost contradiction, him claiming it as a victory, and yet you paid out.
You know, if it's a victory, then why did you pay out $400,000? Why didn't you go to court and fight it, just like the city of Danbury did with the Arcady mess? And if you think it's a victory, why don't you go down there to Kennedy Park and do that again and see what happens?
Exactly.
But look, thanks very much for you guys coming on. I did appreciate it. We didn't get onto the DREAM Act, which is unfortunate, but maybe we can go do that online or bring you guys back and talk about the Connecticut DREAM Act, because that's an important matter as well. So look, everybody, again, this deposition will be made available for you so you can read it for yourselves. I've been saying for a very long time, we have to have this information out in the public. You don't have to trust what I say. Just read the information for yourself and come to your own conclusion. So time's up. Thanks a lot for watching. If you like what you're seeing here, you can see it here on Comcast. You can also see it on Cablevision. You can also see it on Charter. We're all over the place in Connecticut. So we're getting out there. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm Al Robinson, Dave Stevenson, Gene Hislop. Thanks a lot for coming on, and we will see you guys next week.